Welcome to the Anatomy and Clay Learning System podcast. We have a very special panel tonight involved in a very special project, I should say, that is going to be something that I believe will and already has gained a lot of traction and a lot of awareness. And we are very excited to have the folks involved in the Anatomy, Video, and Imagery Diversity Project with us tonight on the podcast across Canada. It's a trans-Canadian kind of experience tonight. It took a little while to put it together. And I'm going to ask each of our folks online tonight to introduce themselves, and then we will get the discussion going. Maybe start with Sarah.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having us, Mark. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Anderson. I'm joining you from the University of Calgary, and I'm an assistant professor in anatomy. And I'm also the director of anatomy for the medical school programs here at University of Calgary. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that I am seated on the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 in the southern region of Alberta, and that the city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta.
Elena?
Hello, my name is Elena Huang, and I am a second-year medical student at McMaster University, and I am a digital illustrator working with the project. McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement.
Kaden.
Hey everyone, I'm Kaden. I'm at the University of Windsor. I'm involved with the video creation process with Dr. Dave Andrews at the University of Windsor. The University of Windsor sits on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, which includes the Ojibwa, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all. It's great to get this cast together. It took a little bit of work. I first spotted the information about the AVID project sometime, I believe, last fall. And I think there was good reason why we waited, because there's some news that will be coming out right away here about all the work that's gone into this project. Sarah, could you just kind of walk us through the basics here of what AVID is?
Yeah, of course. So the Anatomy, Video, and Imagery Diversity Project, AVID for short, is really a digital repository that myself and my colleagues and our wonderful co-creators here have put together. And it's a database of freely accessible original images and videos that properly display some of the ranges of human anatomy, focusing on diversity. And these images and videos that are part of this repository are really intended to be of sufficient quality that they can be used at some of the higher levels of education that we are engaged in. So, for example, a lot of my teaching is in the medical programs, and some of the freely available images out there aren't necessarily at the quality level that we need for some of that teaching. So this really, the purpose of this is to provide resources for educators to use and really emphasize diverse images.
And where and how did this get rolling?
Absolutely. So this kind of initially started, there's 4 faculty members. There's myself, Dr. Heather Jemninsky, Dr. Dave Andrews, and Dr. Leanne Willits, who really are passionate about ensuring appropriate representation in anatomy education. And it was that initially Heather, myself, and Leanne were always working on projects in this area. And then Heather and Dave hooked up on thinking about lines of ways we could bring this forward when they were both recipients of some of the prestigious Canada-wide educational award, the 3M National Teaching Fellow recognition. And they got together and were chatting, and then Leanne and I joined that conversation, and we really came forward with the idea of, starting with some small grants and thinking about how we could start generating a repository here that folks could use.
Did you initially do any kind of a scan to see if something might have already existed that you just didn't know about or hadn't come across, or maybe there was already some energy in another community that was already starting to do something like this?
Yeah, no, that's a really excellent point. So kind of where things are kind of at this point in the anatomy education world is that increasing equity, diversity, and real representation of folks in the anatomy education materials, this is a really big push in the anatomy education world currently. If we look at a lot of the textbooks that we have available to us for to pull resources from, we can really see that a lot of the anatomy teaching has historically been rooted in some colonial and discriminatory practices. And when we look at the actual images that are available, oftentimes they're depicting young, fit, white males. And so looking at that, we really know that explicit representation of the population and the real diversity that there is really imperative for teaching. And so, there was that gap there. I think that at recent anatomy conferences that I've been at, this has been a ask from anatomy educators to publishers, and publishers are starting to make progress in this direction. But I think a lot of this work so far has been grassroots. So we have our project, but I also know about colleagues of myself and folks that I chat with called the Pop Art Project, POPAART. Project. It's called Portfolios of People, and that is a project that has been funded by the American Association for Anatomy. And those folks are working on images of diverse individuals, photography oriented. And so there are folks working on that front. And I think they're starting to get into illustration, and we are working on illustration and videos. And I think it's all of these grassroots efforts that really are going to come together to form the collective of resources that are available. And so I think certainly there are going to be publisher available resources, but one of the things that we are focusing on also in our work is that the repository that we have is going to be an open access repository. So what this means is that anyone can download images and use them with a Creative Commons educational license for their own use. So this really reduces the barriers to access.
Yeah, we're going to take a peek at that in just a minute here, a minute or two. Before we get to the repository and taking a look at it, I'd like to ask both Elena and Kaden, when did you first hear about this? What was your reaction when you did hear about it? And what prompted you to hold your hand up and say, I want to get involved? Maybe start with Elena.
Yeah, of course. I heard about it from Dave, who was at Windsor, and kind of through a class group chat for our medical class. And it was basically looking for medical illustrators and anatomical illustrators that would be interested in a project that was focused on increasing diversity and representation in anatomical illustration. And as someone who is in medicine and sees the importance of representation in anatomy, as well as someone who enjoyed anatomy a lot in education during my undergrad, as well as someone who is involved in digital illustration just as a hobby, I thought this would be a perfect way to blend my hobby and my career, and it would be a great accessory to my current education as well. It would help me learn and allow me to contribute. So I was very excited to join.
That's great. Before we get to Kagan, I need to ask really quickly, you mentioned it was a hobby. Were you an illustrator before you got into the world of anatomy, or was that something that came along as you got into anatomy?
I grew up drawing a lot, but it was more with the traditional fine arts, painting, sculpting, drawing, things like that. Never really had formal art lessons other than a few electives during junior high and high school. I got into digital illustration on my own, bought myself an iPad, and my beginnings were actually in video game illustration.
Ah,
Um,
very
so
cool.
I kind of taught myself on Procreate, which is the program I use now for these images. And it was just fun to do for people that I played games with.
Terrific. Kagan, over to you. How did you get involved and what did you think?
Yeah, I've been working, so same as Elena, I've been working with Dave actually for a while now. I was part of his team last year working on another project of his, and he talked to us a little about the project when it was in its early stages. So I definitely saw a few of the images they'd made at the start, and he would show them to us, and he'd ask us what we thought about it. And then this year, he added a few more people to the team, and he kind of got us involved with making a bunch of videos to add to the repository. So it was just I was a part of his group, and it was what he was doing, but it happened to be something that I found very interesting, and we all thought was like a really important and cool thing to be doing because we used the anatomy textbook for his two classes, so I've had my share of diagrams of like the white male with a six pack doing like the an anatomical position. So it was really cool to see some of the photos and even make some videos that represented the wider population.
And Kagan, could you tell us what program you're in and where you
Yeah,
are in your studies?
I'm in second year. I'm in my undergrad, so I'm majoring in kinesiology, but specifically movement science. So more of the anatomy physiology base.
And what are your goals?
I'm not too sure yet. I've considered med school actually, but maybe chiropractic, just anything involving, I like working with people a lot and I'm interested in the anatomy, physiology sort of stuff. So something that's involving that would be ideal.
Yeah. And Elena, I should have asked you the same question.
Yeah, so currently in medical school, thinking about a surgical specialty, either plastics, or going into trauma surgery via general surgery.
Gotcha. Well, a couple of things. One is let's define diversity. Uh, who wants to take that on in this context?
Is Elena or Kaden? I think, well, why don't I start? I think really showing diversity is looking at your population and having people in our context, having students as well as patients being able to look at the images that are being used to teach about their bodies and having the ability to see themselves in those images, and really having those images be representative of what the population is. I think so much there's a huge amount of variation in anatomy, and so folks really need to see themselves in those images.
There you go. There you go. Very good. Um, well, before we get to the repository, I won't tease it too much, but it just seems like this would feel like such a daunting project. It is, you're up against centuries of developing illustrations and then, of course, later video, photographs. You're up against centuries of scientists and artists and anatomists putting out, publishing um, anatomical illustrations, and that there's this just mountain of history that you're facing. And I don't know if you feel like you need to build an equally big mountain before you're successful, or are you just saying, hey, one step at a time, one day at a time, let's just get at it?
I think, you know what, honestly, I think it's the latter. I think, we have a responsibility, particularly as educators and folks part of this community, whether we are the educators or the learners and artists involved. We have some of a responsibility to help use the position that we have in order to empower others. And so that's really, part of this project. I mean, the anatomy education community more broadly, I think everyone is incredibly open and incredibly recognizing that this is a need and supportive of each other in all of their projects. I mentioned, one for instance, but other folks have projects that they're working for to improve this. And everyone is supportive and encouraging of each other in that work. And so that really does help it make folks feel like they aren't working in isolation. And then the other part too is that what has been really inspiring, as faculty working on this, is that we have engaged a whole team of students, and they are primarily students of equity deserving populations that we have engaged in this project. And it has been absolutely inspirational to work with these individuals and mentor them and give opportunity to those individuals. So that's also a really driving part of why we're able to keep on with some of this work.
Yeah. How many folks now do you think are attached to the project in one way or the other?
Yeah, so I was actually, incidentally, I was looking at my list for that. I think, so right now we have 4 faculty, and on images that are in the repository and going to be available at this moment, there are 16 individuals, images and videos that are all contributors to this. And so that's really exciting to see.
Yeah, wow. Okay, I think let's take a look if we could. Now, this interview is being conducted on March 6th.
Yes.
When did the repository go live?
Well, this has been an exciting week for us because the repository went live on March 4th. So today is Wednesday and it went live on Monday. So we are absolutely thrilled that we have this available. And so can you see my screen here?
Yep. Yes, indeed.
Excellent. So this is the homepage for the repository. I have also put up a QR code that we have that anyone should be able to scan that to get to this homepage and access this. These are the project leads that are here. And here again is a little bit of a description about the project. And then the most exciting part is here we have, right now there's 2 pages worth. But if we go back to the first page here, there is currently 87 digital assets and growing in this repository. So for example, you can access images like this one by Elena. And here we can see, this is one of my favorite ones here on the work that Elena has done. And here we can see some of the reflex arcs associated with withdrawal reflex in the upper extremity. And what you can see here is that it's got all of the data associated with that, some of our funders, which I'll be happy to chat about as well as we go through. And then there is some attribution information here that folks can use if they are using these images. So again, they are Creative Commons licensed, where they are available for download. How we have this set up is that in order to download, someone, an educator or whomever, just needs to make an account with this repository, which is freely available. It just helps us keep some of the analytics data associated with the use of these images. And so images are freely downloadable, and then they can be incorporated within the Creative Commons 4.0 licensing into people's work. And then if we go back to the main page here, you can also see that the images and videos are sortable, whether they're image or video. So here we can see some of the video information. Kaden and the number of the video folks have been working on the skeletal elements of the body. And we can see different collections, so different systems. And then here, which is really fantastic, is that you can also search this database via the main contributors on each of these pieces. And so we are quite thrilled with the growing database that we have here.
Okay, I'm full of questions. One is, who's assigning the work? Who's organizing the work to say, this is next, this is next?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit, and then I'd really love to put it over to both Elena and Kaden on kind of their processes. So initially, when we outset onto this, we really did look at, you know, some of the key images that we were oftentimes using in our teaching, and kind of did some prioritization of those images in when we were first doing some pilot work with this project. And then we really do like to have folks who are involved in the project have input on kind of where their interests are. And so we've kind of created some sets of templates for the image side of, you know, different areas or sets of images that kind of go together. And then on the video side, I know they are systematically working through the skeletal elements at the moment. So, but maybe I'll pass it over to Elena to talk on the imaging illustration side first.
Yeah.
Of course, thank you. So when it comes to illustrations and planning them out, what we've been doing is, like Sarah said, the educators, of course, know best about what images they tend to use, what kind of anatomy they often need to teach about. And they, what they've done, at least what Dave has done, is kind of approach me with a little slideshow of inspiration images from anatomy texts that they currently use. And these are often the classical ones that we've talked about. And then we meet together and come up with ideas. Now, which images we choose to prioritize or move forward with depends on what the limitations of variations in illustration are. For example, skin and surface anatomy, very easy to do a lot of variations on. When it comes to more internal structures, say the brain or the gut, less opportunity sometimes, depending on what kind of positioning you want the image to be in, to incorporate more cultural things or other variations like skin and body habitus. So it depends on how much can we do with this type of image. And then we also determine what positioning would be new to see in anatomy illustration. What layers do we want when it comes to the muscles and the bones, things like that. And once we come up with that and agree with it, then I proceed with illustration. And that comes from both taking inspiration from source images, but also just going online, seeing photography, especially of different common variations that I can think of. And in terms of variations, I kind of approach it through a systematic way. So common variations like age, what that does to skin, to body shape, all things like that. Body habitus, whether someone is going to be very thin or on the heavier side, and how that changes anatomy and whether it would be relevant to include it in an illustration. And I think it's a tight balance sometimes when it comes to making sure that we have a good presentation or inclusivity of different variations, but also making sure that we don't inject our own personal biases, which we all have, into which variations we choose to do and which combinations of variations we choose to do. And that's been a good learning opportunity as well for myself. And I like to add a bit of flair at the end, adding, for example, small skin changes, sometimes with body art, body modifications, even just painted nails, because we don't see these things. Sometimes I like to add cultural things. I did add, I think, henna to one of the illustrations, which was incredibly fun to illustrate as well. But I always like to make sure that I'm trying to do these variations respectfully, and I often consult my friends who are of those cultures to make sure that I am doing so in a correct manner.
Yeah, that's great. The henna there, that's great. Wow.
Yeah, so I do try. So
Could you
I'm sure that's sorry.
Sarah, leave that image up for just a
Yes.
second. We'll get to Kagan here in just a second, but Kaden, I mean, how long did that take you, that one right there?
So what happens is I usually make a base image with a randomly picked skin color often, and then it's relatively easy after that. So the base image usually takes me a couple of hours just to research the anatomy, do all the illustration of the non-changing parts of the image, and then I do the variations. With current technologies for illustration, it's quite easy to change colors, even positions sometimes. And to create layers that overlie the skin, like with henna, it was not too difficult. It usually takes me about half an hour or so to make a different variation compared to the base image.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to Kaden. And Sarah, if you could navigate to some of
Yes.
Caden's work, and he can sort of narrate for us his process for deciding what to work on and how much work goes into each piece.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, we've got a whole, I think we've got 8 students and Dave, Dr. Andrews, working on the videos together. So we met up at the start of the year and we talked about what we felt was the most important area of anatomy to cover. So we decided that the skeletal system was a great place to start with. So then throughout the year, we've kind of mapped out what specific videos we want, how to group them. Initially, we had them a bit more condensed, even like we grouped the hand, the radius, all in the humerus all together in an upper extremity video, but then eventually we decided to separate everything. So once we get that worked out, we some of the members of the group write up a script, and then on different days of the week, different students will show up and we'll film a video, like maybe 2 or 3, depending on how efficient we are and how many retakes we got to do. Um, and we'll get all the clips for it, and then we'll upload it onto a group OneDrive. And then actually, I'm the editor for all of the videos, so I'll on my own time take the clips and just add some subtitling just for accessibility, and just package it together nicely, and then I send it over to Dave for the final check, and then we'll send it over to Calgary for them to check as well.
Nice.
Yeah, and the other
And
thing I'd like to just add in here just briefly is that, this process, one of the kind of quality control things that we've been really working on together as a team is that, we're making sure that the anatomy placements and all of that is correct, and that we're really, working with folks, the creators, to go through and make sure that things are really at that high quality that is really needed so that other educators can go right ahead and incorporate these resources into their own teaching.
fantastic.
Yeah,
So,
we've had to be very sorry. We were
No,
just
go
we
ahead.
were really specific about like sometimes we'd have to do a retake because like whoever was holding the bone had it at like the wrong angle and wasn't able to show like a protuberance or something like that. So it's been kind of cool, almost like a refresher, so that we're learning everything again.
I was just about to ask you if this was helping with each of your studies in terms of helping you kind of incorporate some of this knowledge in a different way once you start being on the production end of these pieces.
Yeah, certainly I have to be very thorough with the images, and therefore sometimes more thorough than I am if I'm just looking at a diagram. So it's definitely very useful for learning, I'd say.
Yeah. Feel the same way, Caden?
Yeah, so it's been about a year since I took Dave's anatomy class, so it's been a great refresher for just going through all the bones. That was one of my favorite aspects of it. So getting to like kind of having to comb through each video and watch it, I've been subconsciously learning it again almost.
Yep, that's great. So, just in terms of if I were to go on and sign up for an account, how much information do I need to give you in order to be able to download something? And does the Creative license, or is it Creative Commons license, just mean I have to give you credit? What does that mean?
Yeah, so usually it's just, providing of an email address that allows us to track downloads that happen from that address. And then, for example, in the and it's unfortunate because I'm, as a creator, kind of logged in, but when you click to do the downloads, there's terms and conditions, which essentially is that you have to, if you're using the image just as you would for any other image, you would have to put that credit there for folks to understand where it came from. And so we've made that hopefully easy for folks, that information comes and is attached to each of the images. So it's quite straightforward. And the reason why we're doing that approach is we really do want to start to measure and take some of the analytics and what are the reaches of this project. And it also gives us an opportunity to, if someone has a question on an image or has a suggestion on an image, we've got some mechanisms in place so that those sorts of inquiries can happen to the team. Or if there's certain requests of, we need this with an additional, then that's something that we can take into consideration as we look to grow this resource for folks.
That's great. I know it just rolled out officially, and I know you already mentioned that everyone's been really supportive. I'm wondering if each of you can just talk a little bit about the reaction that you get as you mentioned this to other folks that you're involved with, and just kind of, is this something where other people are really clamoring to try to be involved with, or have you had any surprising reactions or conversations along the way?
I'll let the students speak first, perhaps.
Maybe Kaden can go
Sure,
first
yeah.
this time.
Yeah, everyone I've told it about, like friends, even I have family members in the medical field, like everyone has a great reaction to it. I think everyone kind of agrees that it's something that makes, aside from the standpoint of like seeing yourself in images, logically, like I think representing the greater population in anatomy images in our education is also important because we're going to be encountering people like that once we start working. So everyone I've talked to just finds it really interesting. And then once I've shown them a couple of the images, they just think it's awesome. And
Yeah.
I feel like I'd be able to be more, we all agree, like me and my fellow students, like we agree it'd be more engaging to be learning with different images that represent different people. I just think it's more engaging for everyone.
Great. And as Elena answers that, Sarah, could you just open up a couple of images as she chats a
Absolutely.
little bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree with Kaden. Everyone's been incredibly supportive. Sometimes there's a little bit of surprise, and then it immediately turns into that's awesome. I think it's a great idea. And what we learn about actually, at least with my classmates, is that it's really important, especially for people who are going to be in healthcare like we are, to know what presentations look like on different types of people. And the simplest thing was, for example, I had a patient with a skin condition, and it was just very difficult to try and recognize that because they were of a darker skin tone. And none of the textbooks that I've seen, the images I've seen, really display that. And recently, I have seen more textbooks include these images, and it sometimes comes as a surprise to be like, oh, this is nice. I've never seen this kind of illustration before. So I do agree that everyone's been very supportive. It doesn't feel like we're fighting an uphill battle to get people to accept it or anything. It's been great.
And from your perspective, Sarah, I know there's been a fair amount of media attention drawn to this. Any surprising conversations or reactions that you want to relay?
I think, I think it's been really incredible how supportive the community has been around this and willing to help share our story. I mean, even Mark, you reaching out to us and your willingness to help us reach broader audiences here, that has been really incredible, that kind of support that we're getting from folks in the community. And, when we talk about, we have this community of learners and educators, but it's also starting to reach beyond some of those communities. And so to start to see and hear and understand some of those reactions from the wider community, I think that's an area, one of the areas that we are looking to explore. And so we are, some of the future work that we'll be working on is some educational scholarship to more closely articulate the impacts that this work has on learners, on the artists who are engaged in the project themselves and, that wider reach to those public audiences. And, perhaps, if any folks who are involved in this work, if there is any resistance that's encountered, sometimes there's, if you read comment sections on news articles, you might see a comment here and there, but it's really interesting to see how those comment sections tend to moderate themselves by other folks chiming in and really indicating support for the work. So, maybe there might be some pieces around how folks who are working in this area can really effectively communicate this work and the importance of it to the general public.
Fantastic. Well, why don't you bring us back to full screen? I think
Absolutely.
we've had a pretty good look around here, which is terrific. As we begin to kind of wrap up a little bit, I just wanted to ask you about funding for this, because you have a few professors who have an idea and a chat in the hall, and suddenly you've got, a project and a website and downloads and video work. You managed to find some resources along the way, at least some beginning resources?
Absolutely. So, no, thank you for the opportunity to acknowledge those resources, because it really is truly, we have these conversations in the hallway, and this is really one of those conversations that has really grown up. And so there's three main currently grants that we have that really have seen this project get off the ground. Two of them are from the University of Windsor. I will say them out. So the first one is the University of Windsor Diversity, Indigeneity, and Anti-Racism Professional Development Fund. We have $5,000 from them. And then also the University of Windsor Office of Open Learning Strategic Development Grant. That was also $5,000. And so that's really how we got a lot of this pilot work going and our processes established. And now we are growing that with a $10,000 grant that we got. It's a Canada-wide grant that was from the Society for Teaching and Learning in Higher Education, and it was the Scholarship of Leadership in Education grant. So it's been really awesome to receive some of those grants and to grow the foundations of this. And those grants are really important because one of the elements of this project is that we are engaging students and equity deserving individuals as co-creators in this. And so a big point of this project is making sure that those individuals are also compensated for their work. And so that's something that is really essential to this project. So we will be looking for and applying for additional grants and looking for other funding to really see this project continue to grow.
Yeah. If somebody out there heard this and wanted to reach out with some support, how would they go about that?
Certainly, they can, with the Ask a Question link through that website, they're welcome to use that link. And certainly, folks can contact me directly, and I can bring that to the team, and we can provide that email address at the end.
Great. Well, I'd like to ask each of you, you enter a field, you enter a science, you are drawn to a path of study, something that you care about and you want to learn more about, and you end up in a project that is helping improve that science, that is helping make that whole academic environment, that whole academic ecosystem a better place for the future. Don't want to put words in your mouths, but how does this make you feel to be part of this? Maybe start with Kaden.
I think definitely it's not something I expected going into this field. Like typically you think of things like anatomy as something very straightforward. So it's been really cool to kind of put like an actual purpose to it that like has a lot of real world implications, and it feels like we're actually making a difference. Like this is something I have never seen before. And I've also feel like I've learned a lot of practical skills alongside of it. Like I've learned how to edit videos from scratch. So I feel like I'm able to like apply things and I've been learning from it, but it's also been contributing to something that I find that I'm really proud of.
Lena?
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes higher education feels like a lot of taking knowledge and experiences and not a lot of contributing. and being able to contribute in a way with my own skills and interests is very fulfilling, and it really adds another layer of enjoyment to learning that I really appreciate. So it's been a great experience.
And Sarah, how about you?
Absolutely. Well, as you can hear from the two students that we're chatting with today, these are inspiring individuals to work with. And, to see the passion that they're bringing to this project has really fed forward the passion that I'm feeling for the project, and, drives it forward, and the importance of diversity and representation for learners and the broader community. That is so, so important to making positive change for the future. So for me, it has been really fantastic being a part of this group and mentoring others, and really working together in a collaborative sense to bring this project forward. And I look forward to connecting with the wider community to share this work that we're doing. And we do have some upcoming conferences that will be regathering together to share the work that we've all been doing in this space.
Well, this has just been a terrific overview. Congratulations on the launch this week of AVID. Thank you all for your time this evening, Kaden, Elena, and Sarah. And from Anatomy and Clay, I know we wish you all the best in the future as this project continues to gain traction and continues to blossom. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Yeah, thank you.